Hey friends, in this episode I'm going to discuss the idea that I've previously said that I'm done with conspiracy theories and that sort of things. And then Spirit gave me the idea of a conspiracy. And before I continue, if you're inspired, take a moment and write in the comment section what you think the remaining conspiracy the Spirit would find valuable is. I'll give you a moment. Is it the war in Russia? Is it Trump? Is it COVID? Is it vaccines? Is it Western medicine? Is it none of those? The conspiracy the Spirit brought to me was the conspiracy of the universe conspiring to create your thoughts, to create in alignment with your thoughts. When you think a thought, the universe conspires all necessary resources in order to manifest the validation of that thought. I'll say it again, maybe in a little bit of a different way. The intention and emphasis is to really get at the crux of this and receive it. All creation is preceded by a thought, meaning you think a thought, and as you think that thought has energy, and that energy expresses itself in a form of creation that validates the previous thought. The energy manipulates the other energetic resources in a magnet-like fashion that brings to you what you put out. It brings to you experientially what you put out in thought. The universe conspires and uses the resources to bring you the experience that validates that preceded thought. The preceding thought. And the reason I use the word conspire, the universe conspires, is because that's how Spirit gave it to me. The carnal mind's so focused on the external interpretations of conspiracy that it misses the internal energetic conspiracy. It's like when I first begin to teach somebody meditation and ego work to refine the ego, we don't have to go around and pick every thorn that the ego expresses symptomology in symptomology as symptomology, but instead pull it the whole thing by its root. Approach it at its root. Remedy it at its root. And then you get all of the symptoms. 444, my phone says. When we first I feel like the tendency when we first get into spiritual work is that we're trying to pick the individual thorns of the ego because we don't understand the ego enough. So we're trying to kind of refine the ego so that it can be a better ego. When we're trying to refine our understanding of ego so we can leave the ego aside altogether. The ego is enmity to God, disconnected from God, enemy to God. It isn't meant to be God. It isn't meant to be perfected. It is perfect as it is, being that tool of contrast, being that tool of resource of undivine from a perspective. So that we have that free will, so that we can choose other than God in the moments we're inspired. Because sometimes we think we know better than God. Sometimes our carnal mind thinks we can do better than God. But we'll get that swift reminder in the form of suffering that will validate otherwise. And some of us are lucky to hear ideas like this. I'm including me in this group so that we may examine and apply these understandings rather than continuing to, in a manner, sleepwalk through life, not understanding the effect that we have on our creation and manifestation, our life, our health, our abundance, our relationships, our careers, our mood. Our environment, right? Our expansion, our relationship with God. We all have these attributes and these abilities. It's whether or not we're aligning with it or distracting from it. To get back to the universe conspiring. Because there's an understanding by some who first get into this too that the common misunderstanding, and Neville Goddard speaks to this a little bit too. When you're intentionally manifesting, it's your job to hold in mind the creation as though it's already been done. You're affirming it's already been completed. And then the universe conspires to provide it. It's not your job to figure out how to attain it. Notice in the moments that you do so, you make those strident efforts to attain something, how it's forced, it's exhaustive. Does it feel good? Or does it feel like resistance? Does it feel like you're pushing up against something not meant to happen? But when you let it come, when you let the universe conspire and bring it to you, bring it to your awareness, maybe you'll get an inspiration, a spiritual direction on where to go. And then you can act on that. But to just act on the egoistic interpretation, trying to acquire and attain, that's doing it with resistance. That's doing it with the brake on. By the time you get it, you'll have suffered significantly, which is a telltale sign that you're out of alignment with divinity in that process. As we get a little bit more practiced with these ideas, once we start recognizing that resistance, that brake is on, we can use that as a sign. Okay, the door is not wide open. This isn't easy. What's easy is meant to be. The path of least resistance, the path of least resistance. Ego is the source of resistance. Spirit is really emphasizing resistance. The path of least resistance. Think about it this way. The carnal mind represents resistance, and spirit represents divine grace. Which one flows better? Which one feels better? Which one's more relaxing? Which one's more nourishing? Which one's more exhaustive? Which one's more draining? Which one's more stressful? The path of least resistance. It's not about doing the least amount of work egoistically. It's about being the least egoistic. And when you're less egoistic, you're less likely to be directed by that source of resistance that is the ego. 11:11. So my phone says. And if you're less egoistic, what are you? You've got two options, friends. You're either carnal or you're spirit. You're either ego or you're spirit. You're either resistance or you're grace. Okay. Begin to implement this. Begin to practice it. Begin to examine it. These are practical understandings. See it as done in your mind. Do the work there by being with it consciously. Take the doingness to the beingness. Let them meet each other. That's beautiful. That was a beautiful way for Spirit to put it just then. Take the doingness to your beingness. Meaning, do it in mind, do it with your consciousness, do it with your beingness. Your physicality isn't your beingness. That's a vessel. That's the least of you. That's the limited part of you. To try to manipulate this universe with the least part of you seems like a difficult task. But when you can do it in your imagination, you can do it in consciousness, you can do it in mind. Easy peasy. That's light work, literally. Light work. Spirit's brilliant, isn't it? All right, we'll leave it there for now, my friends. Bless you, and we'll talk soon.